Welcome to our webinar on what is supervision for career practitioners and how does it work. This is a webinar for the Career Development Association of Singapore, and welcome to all of you who are watching this webinar. And it is a wonderful time to have all of you here because really this is a wonderful opportunity that all of us can gather together and to have a discussion around this topic around peer supervision and how important peer supervision is to career practice in Singapore. Now, we're going to thank Claire who has been hosting this meeting tonight, and with many of you here, I know that it is also a good time for us to do a bit of reflection about your own practice. And some of you are new practitioners, but some of you have been practitioners for a fairly long time. But I think at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter whether how new or how old you are as a practitioner. What's critical for all of us is that we are continually growing, we are continually enabling ourselves to become better practitioners. So attending webinars such as this as part of our CDAS offerings gives you the opportunity to continue to grow your skills and to give you opportunity to continue to enable yourself to become better in your practice so that your client can benefit. So even as we start, I'm going to ask all of you to go into your groups, and in your groups, I'll let you all to begin to discuss with each other this question. This question will be this, as we start this webinar, is why do helping professionals like all of us require clinical supervision? So there are two parts to this question. The first question here about why do helping professionals. Now, this helping professionals in this case is in regards to all of us as career practitioners, but oftentimes the term helping professionals also refer to professionals such as counselors, psychologists, social worker, and all those different fields. So, but in the context of what we are doing this evening is about career practitioners. And the term clinical supervision is very different from what we wrote there, operational administrative supervision. The difference between clinical supervision and operational supervision is this, that clinical supervision is where it is in a process where the helping professional is being enabled by a senior helping professionals to increase or improve the skill sets around the work of careers coaching. Whereas typically in the operational or administrative supervision is where we have like our boss or our supervisor in the organization, and their role is to supervise us in terms of the task that we need to do in regards to the organization that employs us. So the difference between clinical and operational administrative supervision is that in clinical, it is where the process gets better in terms of our skill sets as we do the work of careers coaching with our clients. So right now, as all of you go into your groups, go ahead and discuss this question. And when you finish it, we'll come back and then we'll do a continuation of this video. Welcome back to the discussion. Now, all of you have had a good opportunity in your groups to have chatted with each other. And in my group, one of the participants mentioned this very interesting point, that she felt that as a career practitioner, especially one who is practicing by themselves, that means not employed by an organization, but running their own practice, that career practice is a lonely journey. That's an interesting point because I would think that for those of us who are in private practice, it is true that it can be fairly lonely because as a single entity, that means you are running your own private practice. There's no other career coaches or career practitioners working alongside you compared to those of you who are working in, say, in NTU or WSG or E2I. And I agree that as a private practice, it can be a lonely experience. That is why I would think that in the context of what we're talking about here in this evening's webinar, that as a peer supervision process, that you are able to go through this entire journey, not by yourself, but because in peer supervision, you have the opportunity to come together with your peers, your career peers, and in that process, you can work together to provide supervision to each other, to provide that like iron sharpens iron, provide the opportunity so that all of you in the group can enable each other to become better at what you do. But before we talk about that, I want to come back to this definition of clinical supervision. So, as you see on screen, clinical supervision is a formal and disciplined working alliance that is generally, but not necessarily, between a more experienced professional and a less experienced professional. So in this case, a less experienced professional is called the supervisee, and the more experienced practitioner or professional is known as a supervisor. So in this clinical work, what the supervisor does with the supervisee is the supervisor will work to improve the supervisee's process or work with their clients. So, so in this case, what happens is this, that as all of us as career coaches, we will have our clients, people we work with, and especially if you are in our private practitioner, well, actually it doesn't really matter whether you're private practice or you're working organization. We all have that process of working with our clients. But having said that, imagine now we have a supervisor, a clinical supervisor, who is working alongside us to help us improve the work that we do with our clients and enabling our clients to be better met in terms of their needs. So that's one thing that happens where the supervisor will help the supervisee to improve the quality of their careers coaching work with their clients. The second piece is where the supervisor will then work to ensure that the supervisee will do things that is mainly for the benefit of the client's welfare. So it is sort of like an opportunity where the supervisor enables the supervisee to be accountable for his or her work with the client towards the supervisor. So along the way, what happens sometimes is the supervisees will provide videos or they provide audio recordings, and this gives the supervisor an opportunity to observe the things that the supervisee does in the careers coaching or careers counseling session. The third thing what supervisors do is they support the supervisee in relation to the work and supports their professional development. So bullet points 3 and 4 is related to bullet point 1, but the main thing around supervision is that this process enables the supervisor, which is you and me, the career coaches, to become better at what we do so that our clients in the long term will benefit from the things that we do for them. So that is what we call the basic definition of clinical supervision. But in this case of what we're looking at here, the 4 bullet points that really is the purpose of what supervision is all about. Let me just share with us this next screen. What are some of the benefits of receiving clinical supervision? When we as career coaches receive supervision from our supervisor, what happens is that in that moment of interaction with our supervisor, the supervisor will ask questions. The supervisor will enable us to begin to reflect on our practice. Sometimes the supervisor, upon watching our video or listening to the audio recording, will begin to challenge us in regards to certain things that we do in the session with our clients. So these challenges gives us a chance to reflect and to also think about what are the things that we've done well and what are the things we haven't done so well. And all this environment comes around with what we call the challenging and improving of our skill set as a career coach. And also at the same time, our supervisor will also challenge us in terms of the theories and the models or the frameworks that we use when we work with our clients. And very often, if we do not have supervision, what happens is that we end up doing things which is convenient. We end up doing things which may be easy for us as a career coach, but sometimes it may not necessarily be the best thing for our clients. So it's important that we become accountable to a senior practitioner or a supervisor in this case, so that there is a touch point or a checkpoint to ensure that we're always doing the right thing. The other benefit of us receiving clinical supervision is where we also are given the opportunity for us to identify an area for development. The typically in most of the more established professions, like for example, psychology, counseling, social work, even nursing, or some of the other professional fields, even teaching, these professions, the practitioners in these professions have to be a member of an association. And as part of the membership of the association, every year before they renew the membership, they need to provide evidence that they have completed what we call continual professional development, or CPD hours. Different associations or membership or even practice have different standards when it comes to CPDs. In the counseling profession, at least from where I came from, is that we need to have at least 10 hours of supervision hours. That means we need to receive 10 hours of supervision before we can renew our membership every year. So this is one of the practice that established professions have been using for the longest time. In our career practice in Singapore, because we're so new and so young, we don't really have this process where members, upon renewing their membership with our association, are required to demonstrate that they have completed their CPD hours. So in our context, what is really critical for us is that we have to slowly build ourselves up to the point where we know and are able to come to a point where the whole profession will grow such that we are able to have an opportunity to increase our professional identity. So, like we all said, that it's so important that all of us, because we're so new in a profession, that we really have to enable ourselves to grow as a profession so that we become more professional, that's one, but also at the same time, we enable the public to recognize that what we do is a critical piece of the economy. So that is a second benefit of receiving clinical supervision. The third benefit in this case would be where in the supervision process, we are given the environment where we can also begin to explore something about our own personal or emotional reactions. So why do I mean by that? Is if you look at the work that you do, when you meet a client, sometimes you'll find that our clients may not necessarily be very calm, or it may not be that our client is very composed all the time. Because imagine if you meet a client who has just lost his job or just been made redundant, and right now this client is slightly desperate about his or her job. So you can see that for individuals who come to see us as career coaches, sometimes they may be filled with emotions or anxiety. So this level of anxiety and emotions is part and parcel of what we experience in the process of providing careers coaching and careers counseling. So, and sometimes what will happen is that as a practitioner, we may also have certain emotional reactions to certain individuals. In those of you who've gone through my training before, you know I talked about the concept of transference and countertransference. Of course, I won't talk about it now, but the point about transference and countertransference is that we may inevitably feel some emotions or reactions based on what the client is presenting to us. And sometimes these reactions are very unconscious. So that's why it's very critical we have a supervisor or a clinical supervisor in this case to be watching our video or at least listening to the audio recording of our session, and then being able to pick out some of our possible emotional reactions which we ourselves may not have been aware to begin with. So it's critical that when having a third person, which is our supervisor, to pick up these unconscious reactions that we have, And then from there, we can begin to discuss what actually was going on in the session inside of us when the session was going on, what was leading us to have that particular emotional reaction towards the client. It could be a positive reaction, it could be a negative reaction, but usually it is a negative reaction that we are actually working through and trying to come to terms with. So these are the three key benefits when we do clinical supervision that enables us as a career coach to become much more effective in the things that we do. So as for the clinical supervisors, what are some of the competencies that they need to have? So of course, looking at the chart in front of you or the screen in front of you, you see that most skilled clinical supervisors have the ability to give feedback as well as to receive feedback. Now, of course, most of the time, for those who are familiar with supervision and who are either you are recipient of supervision or you actually give supervision, for the few of you on the platform who are fairly advanced and senior in terms of practice, you know that it is not just only one-way traffic as a supervisor providing all the feedback to the client, but sometimes your supervisees may also provide feedback to us as supervisors. Like maybe your supervisors may say, I would like to focus more on this area, that area, and I felt that maybe in our past 2 or 3 supervision sessions that this was missed out, or I didn't feel that my developmental needs were fully taken care of. So these are some of the possible feedbacks that our clients may present to us. So it's critical as a supervisor that we have the skill to give as well as to receive. The next couple of points will be that even as supervisors, we need to be able to reflect on our own practice. Like any professional practice, like I mentioned earlier, as a career coach, we need to constantly be developing and growing. Likewise, as a supervisor, we also need to constantly be growing and developing our skills and our practice as a supervisor. So that is why, as the competency of a clinical supervisor, is that the clinical supervisor continues to be able to reflect on their own practice so that they continually grow. The third point you see on the screen there is that we need to be able to structure the supervision in such a way that it is beneficial to our clients. So sometimes we may use case supervisions. That means we ask our supervisees to present to us a case, or we may do role plays with our client, meaning our supervisor becomes our supervisee becomes the career coach. We act as a client, we do a role play so that we can observe what is it our career coaches are doing. We can provide live supervision, meaning to say that we have the supervisee and their client in the counseling or coaching room, and we are either in another room or we're watching through a video recording, live video recording of what is going on in the coaching session. That is what we call a live supervision. Or we may even review a videotape session, or read a transcribed session. So depending on the modalities, the point is, as a supervisor, we need to be flexible to use all the different approaches that enables us to view and at the same time to correct as well as to develop our supervisees. And of course, the fourth bullet point is we need to have knowledge and processes around the different ethical dilemmas that our supervisee may encounter in the things that they do. So, of course, this list here is not an exhaustive list. There are many, many other competencies that clinical supervisors must have, but these are just 4 which I felt I want to point out to all of us as we fully understand what is it that supervisors do for us as career coaches. So that once we understand what is it that supervisors do and provides benefit to us as career coaches, then later on, as I move into the concept of peer supervision, we'll begin to understand why the whole, how do we apply the whole peer supervisory concept with the things that we do with ourselves and with our client. So now this slide brings me to the current reality of career practice in Singapore. We know that career practice in Singapore is not very long, although historically, career practice started somewhere between 2003, 2004. It sort of started with People's Association at the time, where the in People's Association in 2003, 2004, what they started was more like a job placement type of service for Singaporeans. And then over time, that service grew. And then, of course, Workforce Singapore, WDA at the time, was also formed around 2005, 2006. And that was where this whole piece of job coaching was then transferred over to WDA at the time. Then WDA continued to do the stuff that they do. But it was really more in 2012, 2013 that career practice and career training and certification became more mainstream in Singapore amongst career practice. So, for those of you who were there from the beginning, you know in 2015, I was one of the few who started together with IAL and WDA the whole ACCDF training. And I was doing the training for our new generation of career coaches and practitioners in Singapore from 2015 to 2018. So if you look at it in reality, career practice has only been around for about 5 to 7 years. So if you look at it from 5 to 7 years, in other words, you're only like primary one. So we are still very, very new in terms of practice. And as a primary one student or 7 year profession, we are so new that a lot of people in the public really has no idea what is it that career practice or career coaches do. Most people will think that career coaches provide job placements. Job placement is actually only one of the component of career development practice. There are many, many components or different practices under the umbrella of career development. So we have counseling, career coaching, job placements, we have career exploration, we have things like job search, all those various components are all part and parcel of career development practice. But by and large, people in Singapore generally still only have the idea it's just a job placement kind of role. So that's why it shows that we need to grow in terms of our profession and as well as our professional identity. I'll give you an example of a very related practice, which is counseling. I started practicing counseling since 1997. So that was, again, a long time ago. And at the time, counseling, although counseling up to the point was around in Singapore for close to 20, 25 years, but still the whole profession of counseling up to the point was still very unknown. And people always assume that only people who are crazy, means mentally unsound, will go see a counselor. Of course, now we know today that it doesn't mean that you have to be crazy to see a counselor. It simply means that if you are going through certain struggles or certain challenges in your life, you want to talk to someone who's professional to help you work through your emotions and perhaps come out with certain strategies to be able to cope with the emotional stress or difficulties you encounter. But if you go back in history, from 97 all the way to 2003, when I was practicing as a school counselor, and of course, 2003, I joined SMU and I started a counseling service. The practice was still very young. And even in my time in SMU in the 2003, 2004, when I first started, even the students themselves were not very sure what counseling was all about. Even the professors in the university also was not sure what counseling was all about. So it took me many years rather, maybe 5 to 7 years to slowly build up the service and explain and educate the entire community for people to understand what counseling is all about. In somewhere in the mid 2000, Ministry of Education started counseling, and they started to move to employ that every school should have at least one counselor. And it was because of that move, and you look at it from 2005 all the way to now 2020, about 15 years, that today people, the schools, the students are fairly familiar about the role of counselors, and they know what is it that counselors do. So it took the profession, the counseling profession, about 15 years to get to where they are today. So if you look at this, look at it in relation to careers coaches, we are only about 5 to 7 years. It will take us at least another maybe 7 to 8 years more before the public fully understands what it is that we do. So on the second bullet point, apart from Ministry of Education, the education and career guidance and NTU's CEO team, very, very few organizations with career practitioners actually provide clinical supervision to the career coaches. I do know that PSD, Public Service Division, they are also starting to career services amongst the different agencies. And the plan is also to have all these career coaches in the civil service agencies to receive supervision. So that is on the way. But right now, in the current practice, only these two organizations provide supervision to the career coaches. So we can see that there is a lack of this developmental challenge that career coaches have. Even those working in organizations, IHLs, they are not provided with clinical supervision. What more, even the private practitioners, that you probably will not even be considering receiving clinical supervision as well. So, and partly because bullet point number 3, there is no requirement, unlike counseling or psychology, that career practitioners who are members of CDAS or even PCDA, there's no requirement that they must receive supervision as part of their professional development. So all career coaches and career practitioners in Singapore really right now at this point of time are left largely to their own to develop themselves professionally. And of course, those with more resources will pay to attend workshops, attend webinars, attend courses to improve themselves. But without a structured process, without a framework, without something that provides practitioners with a clear guide, career practice will continue to be where we are. And the problem will be if we will stagnate in terms of profession and we won't grow in our professional identity. So that's why my encouragement to us, all of you on the platform, is that we really have to grow our profession so that in terms of our professional identity, we will grow and the members of the public over time will recognize what it is that we do and they'll appreciate us for the service that we do. And in relation to that, because they appreciate the service that we do, they are willing to pay to see us for careers practice and careers coaching or careers counseling. So until that point comes, we will continue to struggle. So that's why my encouragement to us is we need to grow, we need to receive supervision, we need to challenge ourselves so that we will bring our profession to the next level. So due to the lack of clinical supervision, so what can we do to help ourselves to grow? And that is where this the topic of tonight's webinar is, that my suggestion for all of us is we develop peer supervision. Meaning to say, all of us as peers, we begin to work with each other. As a peer, we will help each other to grow. We will challenge each other. We will provide a structure for us to, as if we are in a typical senior, junior clinical supervision environment, we replicate this structure into a structure where we have peers, like all of us, working together and assisting each other to become more effective and to be more skillful in terms of the relationships that we build with our clients, as well as the professional skills that we have. So this is where all of us work together to push our profession to the next level. So what are some of the aspects of peer supervision? Now, typically, if you look at the screen here, that when it comes to peer supervision, of course, we don't really have it here yet in Singapore yet, but for psychology in Singapore and also in Australia, that all psychologists, it is as part of membership, they are allowed to clock in 10 hours of peer supervision as part of their continual professional development. That means all psychologists have to receive clinical supervision, but out of the number of hours that they receive supervision, 10 hours can be peer supervision, which is a good thing. So in our context, my suggestion is this, that as part of the aspect of peer supervision, that all of us who are fellow practitioners, we gather together. So that's why the first bullet point is that we all are around of the same knowledge level, same skills or status level, And because of that, there is no such thing as you are senior, I'm junior, and that you are more established than I am. But in that context, we are all working together as peers. We are working together as equals. So in the context of peer supervision, there really is no defined leader. Although having said that, I will say later on that there are different roles that we play. And of course, based on the roles, there will be what we call a facilitator. So the facilitator will facilitate the process of peer supervision. But within that group of peers, there isn't one that says, I'm the leader. There isn't something like that. And this as the other aspect of peer supervision is that this group of professionals, we will then meet regularly to discuss some of these points here, like what are some of the challenges that we face in our typical sessions with our clients, or even share one of the difficult challenges that we encounter. We do self-exploration. What are some of the things that we felt that we need to grow and we want to talk about it? Some of us may also encounter situations with working with people from different culture, different backgrounds, diverse environments. Of course, in Singapore's context, it is not as stark. But having said that, is nowadays diversity is no longer just about what race we are, what ethnicity we are, but we also need to include people with disabilities. We also need to include people from different gender identities as well. So all these are all part and parcel of diversity and culture that we have to challenge ourselves to grow into. Some of us may also encounter or learn new intervention techniques that we want to share, and some solutions, some new solutions that we have come up with that we want to share with our fellow peers, and having them to critique our new practice or new approach. And maybe because like iron sharpening iron, when we present something and we get a challenge from a peer, because we're equals, the goal is not to tear each other down, but the goal really is to build each other up. So of course we give ourselves permission to challenge each other and to develop ourselves. And what some of us may want to talk about the ethical situations we encounter or some of the difficult caseloads that we have. So the idea is we come together to build each other up, to challenge each other, and to provide each other with the opportunity to grow as a group. So what are some of the benefits of peer supervision? Of course, networking. The thing about peer supervision is this. Of course, those of you working in organizations like NTU or E2I or WSG, the peers that you're working with are all from the same organization. So of course, when it comes to the networking part, it may not be as strong because you already know each other. But for those of you who are private practitioners, this is where the networking part comes in. Because as a private practitioner, you may know like 5 or 6 different private practitioners, individual practitioners, and all five to six of you decide to come together to form a group. And this is where the networking comes in, because you begin to know more about your fellow practitioners, you begin to share your expertise with each other, and that's where the networking component of peer supervision comes in. The other benefit, like I mentioned earlier, is because in that peer supervision, we challenge one another, and through that challenge, our professional identity grows. Our professional identity becomes sharper. Our professional identity becomes firmer. And that is where, when the more we practice, the more we do in careers practice, the more people will know what is it that we do. So when we have peer supervision, our professional identity will be challenged and grown as well. Of course, we do supervision. Of course, we practice our skills. We also practice our supervision skills with each other. So things like role playing, all that's all part and parcel of the practice. So the role of the peer supervisors, which I'll talk in a short while, is a rotational role. So everyone will have a chance to be the peer supervisor, and every one of us will have a chance to be a supervisee. So because all of us have a chance to play those different roles, our skill sets will also develop. And because again, we are all equals, we all are given the right to challenge each other, and we all are given the right to to give feedback, both positive and negative feedback to each other. But the main purpose is not to tear down, but the main purpose is to enable us to grow. Of course, in some of the benefits, again, there's also peer interaction. So, like going back to what I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, that some individuals, private practitioners, do comment that as a private practitioner, it's very lonely because I don't have, besides myself and my client, I don't have a peer to interact with. So in peer supervision, this is where the support is. This is where the interaction with each other is. This is where we counter social isolation and we provide the support to each other. Of course, this minimizing of power struggle is that because at the beginning point, we established that we are all equals, and because of that, there is a minimization of a power struggle of say who is more senior, who is more junior, that kind of things. So of course, the last two bullet points there is that as part of the peer supervision process, we gain a sense of self-efficacy because our skills are developed. We become more confident. We are able to trust our colleagues and our peers, and we build our self-esteem because we get more and more confident about our work. And in relation back to the peer interaction, because this peer supervision will counteract social isolation, this will then prevent burnout. And especially when we are practicing by ourselves, sometimes we do get burnout without knowing. So it's important. This is where the continue to, that's where I encourage all of us to have this to be engaged in peer supervision so that you will partake of all these benefits in peer supervision. So now this slide shares with us what are the models of peer supervision. Of course, we have three different types. Of course, if you read the different literature, there are many, many different types of peer or group supervision. But for the purpose of this webinar, I'm only going to present to us three different models, which is a dyadic peer supervision, the triadic peer supervision, and the group supervision. Let me just go through in a bit more details. What are the three different types of peer supervision models? The first is what we call dyadic peer supervision. So this is where peers or the two peers meet in pair. So like for example, Claire and I, we are, say for example, two of us choose to work together in a dyadic peer supervision. So in this model, Claire and I will then take turns to be a supervisor and a supervisee. So for example, today, I'm a supervisor, Claire is a supervisee. So she will present to me a case, and then as a supervisor, a peer supervisor, I will ask questions, I will challenge her, I will ask her about theories, about framework, about the things which I noticed in the video, and to sharpen her. Then next week, our roles will rotate, and Claire will now be the supervisor, and I'll be the supervisee, and I'll present my case. I will show a video. I will discuss with Claire the struggles I face working with the client, or a particular skill that I feel I want to develop because I'm lacking in. And this is where the peer supervision process in a dyadic model comes in. The second model is what we call the triadic peer supervision model. And this is where three persons or three peers work together. So one peer takes the role of the supervisor, and the other two, the two roles, one is a supervisee, and the third one can play the role of a observer. So what will happen here is similar to dyadic. The peer supervisor will listen to what the supervisee is presenting, and then the supervisor will then challenge. The supervisor will ask questions, but all these while, the observer is also observing the interaction between the supervisor and the supervisee. So that at the end of the session, the observer will give his or her feedback to both the supervisor as well as the supervisee. And then this feedback enables both the supervisor and the supervisee to be continually sharpened and to maybe focus in more on the process. And then the following week, the roles will rotate. And what were previously the person who was playing the role of the observer will now become the supervisee. And previously, the person who's the supervisor becomes the observer. And the supervisee now becomes the supervisor. So this is where the triadic models rotate, and everybody will spend time equally to challenge each other in terms of the questions and answers around supervision. The third model in this case now would be the group peer supervision. And this is where I present to all of us as the model for us to adopt. Usually, we have between 4 to 11 members in a peer supervision group. This is what the literature says. But based on my experience and based on my observation, my recommendation is between 4 to 6, maximum 7. Because to me, anything more than seven, the number of number of interactions or the dynamics of interaction becomes fairly complicated, and it becomes a bit more difficult when it comes to facilitating that group. So my preference will be between 4 to 6. That would be the ideal number. So in this model of the group peer supervision, we'll have a supervisee. That's one. So this supervisor every week rotates. We'll have a facilitator. Now this facilitator, his or her role is to facilitate the whole discussion, is to facilitate the process. Later on, I'll share with us what the process is. And then the rest of the members act as a peer supervisor. So what will happen in this case? Imagine I have so for example, I have Claire, myself, I have Sam, I have say maybe Jeffrey, or I have Ben. For instance, so it's 5 persons, right? So imagine this time around I am the supervisee, and Claire is a facilitator. So we have Sam, we have Jeffrey, and we have Ben, who are the peer supervisor. All three of them will listen to what I have to present in terms of the case. It can be a video, or I can talk verbally about the challenge I encounter. And as I share my situation, either one of the three peer supervisors will begin to ask questions, will begin to challenge me, will begin to share their perspectives about what I've just talked about. And along the way, what will happen is that Claire, who is playing the role of the facilitator, will observe and ensure that everybody keeps to time, or that we follow the process. And this gives us all the chance to be actively participating within the peer supervision group. Now, one of the things I also want to talk about just very briefly about peer supervision is this, that in the peer supervision group, everyone is actively engaged. That means there shouldn't be a situation where out of five, we have 2 persons who are not engaged. They are there just to observe, or they're there just to be a freeloader kind of thing, and then let the other three do the kind of work. No, in peer supervision, every person is actively engaged in the session. And when that happens, everybody benefits from the session. All right. So this is what we talk about in terms of the responsibility of peer supervision. The last bullet point there, that sometimes that in the peer supervision group, there is a situation sometimes where we have different practitioners from different industries choosing to come together to form a peer supervision group. So maybe, for example, we can have a nurse, we can have a psychologist, we can have a social worker, we can have a career coach, we can have a counselor coming together, forming a peer supervision group. Even though all five of them are from different industries, but the interesting thing is this, that it still works because all five are still in the helping profession, even though different industries, but still helping the clients or patients if they are from nursing industry. But by and large, the kind of struggles, the kind of process is generally about similar, although can be slightly different. But what happens is there's richness in the information that's being shared. So that's why this is one possible model that's interesting, that different groups, different individuals may consider forming in terms of a group peer supervision. So what is a process that we're going to talk about in a short while? So in a group peer supervision, of course, there are many different processes, but we are going to use a border structured peer group supervision model, and where everyone will play the rotation basis. So looking at all the individual in the circle, you notice is exactly what I mentioned earlier. We have a facilitator, we have a supervisor, a supervisee, and we have three peer supervisors who will ask the questions. So this is how the process. Everyone will take turns to rotate around and to provide that supervision to the supervisee. So what are some of the things that we will typically cover in peer supervision? So what will happen is that in this case, the supervisee will talk about any of these things. The supervisee can talk about a case, and as the supervisor is sharing about a case or case review, the peer supervisors can ask questions around the case, or I can present an ethical issue, or talking about a boundary that is in danger of being crossed, for example, or maybe legal issues, or any of those particular issues that we see on the screen there. that the supervisee can bring up any of these particular points for supervision. And this is where we rely on each other as peers to sharpen each other, because all of us have different experiences, all of us have different skill sets, although assumptions we all are around the same level, but we all have different exposures and we all have different theoretical uh, um, philosophies or foundation. And based on the different philosophies that we have and the kind of questions and the kind of focus that we have when we ask questions of each other, this is where the richness of the process comes around. So looking at this process, we have this four-stage process. So the facilitator will facilitate this process. So what a facilitator will do is have the supervisee to begin to share what is the particular point, or the say this previous skill, what is it that the supervisee wants to be talking about. So then the supervisor will then present the case or recount the case to the fellow peers. Then the next stage is the peer supervisors will begin to provide feedback, provide asking questions, or begin to reflect with the supervisee the point or the particular matter or issue that was brought up. Then the facilitator will continue to facilitate the discussion, and at the end of the entire discussion, or will provide a summary. Then what will happen is the facilitator will then indicate to the presenter or the supervisee whether that the needs have been met. So if you look at it, it's a very simple process of peer supervision, which relies on, of course, equality, relies on everybody being engaged, relies on the facilitator to facilitate the process. Of course, for those of you who wants to start this as a fresh thing, the initial part there will be some discomfort, and maybe what are some of the boundaries or what are some of the things we have to do. Of course, in the purpose of this webinar, I don't have enough time to talk through all of that. But of course, this is just a preview to the master class that I'm going to be teaching in August. So for those who really want to learn how to start peer supervision groups and knowing the deeper process or the kind of questions or the modality and the framework that you will use, my encouragement to you is sign up to join us for the masterclass in peer supervision that's going to happen in the month of August. At the end of this webinar, we'll share more about that. But right now, I just want to go on to the process. So going back to the first stage where the supervisee will share. Now, like I mentioned earlier, the feedback requests will be things like your theoretical alignment, process, going back to the previous screen. All those things you see in the previous screen will be brought up at this point. All right. So if you look at the entire process, it is fairly simple and it is fairly straightforward. But I think the biggest challenge for a lot of us is the fear of starting a peer supervision group, or the fear of being challenged by our peers in a so-called public setting. Of course, it's not public, but it's in the setting because we fear embarrassment, or we fear that the area of lack that we have, or we fear that this gap is made known and we will be embarrassed and we lose face. But I think one of the foundations of peer supervision is this, that in order for us to grow as a professional, there really is no such things as a fear of losing face. Because as a professional, we need to constantly challenge ourselves to be growing. So if we're too afraid of receiving feedback, then what will happen is that we are working in such a safe environment that we can't grow. So for those who are familiar with Carol Dweck's whole body of work about the growth mindset and the failure mindset, so really my encouragement to us as career practitioners is to adopt that growth mindset and not to see failure as an end in itself, but to see failure or being picked out by our peer supervisors, or they address a gap that they see in us or a blind spot. Take that as a opportunity for us to grow and to become so much more better in terms of our practice. So, so in conclusion, before I end the webinar, my encouragement to all of us as career practitioners here in Singapore is this. Like I said, we are very young. We are only 7 years old, 5 to 7 years old in terms of our practice in Singapore. We still have a ways to go. before we have senior practitioners who can provide good clinical supervision to us. But it doesn't mean that we have to wait until the point where some of the senior practitioners, of course, on the platform, we have some of the senior practitioners, but there's just too few of us. So my suggestion to all of us in career practice in Singapore is let's not wait 7 to 10 years before a senior practitioner comes around to provide supervision. Let's start now. Let's start today, where we build ourselves up. We gather ourselves, whether you're working in an organization like E2Y, WSG, or NTU, or any of the IHLs, or you're working as a private practitioner in a one-person setup, wherever you are, my encouragement to you is now is the time to start the peer supervision groups so that we can start the process of growing and developing our professional identity as career practitioners here in Singapore. So that's my encouragement to all of us. And thank you for staying with me all through. And right now, I want to hand the time back to Claire, who will lead us for the rest of this webinar. So Claire, back to you right now.
Okay, thank you, Tim, for sharing. That's really awesome. Okay, actually, while we are sharing, we do have some people with some questions. Give me a minute to pull up the questions. Okay, so let me share screen with you. All right, so there are about 4 questions here. So the first question is, in the event if during the peer supervision, what happens if the person or the participants are low in case studies or situation to share?
Okay, that's a good question. Of course, the assumption here is if you're all practicing, you all will have clients to talk about or case to share about in your peer supervision group. But of course, if in a situation where you really have no clients, then of course you have to of course let it be known to your fellow peers that I don't have any cases to share this time around. So can I pass my turn as a supervisor so that someone else can share? But the flip side of it, it also is a positive thing because if you know that your turn is coming up to be a supervisor and you know that you don't have a case, that means that you very well have to go quickly find a client so that you can practice your career practice and you have a client so that you have a case that you can actually present. Of course, but if you really don't have a client at a point for whatever reason, then what can happen is you can, instead of sharing a case, you can be talking about something that you read, something that you learned that particular week. Maybe you read about a new intervention technique or you attended a new workshop about a maybe assessment tool. So you can take the opportunity to share this new information to your fellow peers. So it need not be just a case studies or a situation, but it can be sharing from a learning or something along those lines.
Right. So on that note, I'm just curious, do they set an agenda in the sense like, is there a theme for every session or the structure is always the same? You share a case study or you share something they have learned along the way?
I would think in this case, of course, ideally, everybody should come prepared to share a case because it's from the case that we learn the most. But I think having said that, what's important is that the peer group, before they even start the meetings, that there should be a certain ground rules or a certain process that everybody should follow. And then when it say, for example, you have A, B, C, D, E, F, or A, B, C, D, E, 5 persons in a group, and when A is the turn for A to be a supervisor that particular week, A can choose to either talk about the case or A can also choose to bring up one of the many points that in my screen I shared earlier. It can be an ethical dilemma, it can be a learning process, it can be a skill set, it can be anything. The main thing is that, like I mentioned earlier, we are all engaged in a group. So when it's your turn to be a supervisor for the week, you make sure that you have something to discuss, bring about, so that all of us can benefit from discussion.
Right, thanks for sharing. So that really leads me to the second question. You're sharing that perhaps there may be 5 in a group. So do I assume that all the members have equal status? And
Mhm.
also that they're bound to have someone who may be more experienced in the group. So there may be a tendency to have that person as a leader, or many may see that as a leader. So how do we handle this situation?
Okay, so like I said earlier, that in a peer supervision group, all of us have equal status. That means to say all of us are peers, all of us are equals, meaning there is no leader, there's no senior practitioners. We
Right.
just treat each other as equals. And of course, there is always a tendency that if there is a practitioner in the group who is senior in stature, like for example, some of you on the platform know Jeffrey, who is here in the group. He's been
Mm-hmm,
in a space for a long time. So 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 of course, typically most of us who are junior in a group, if you have someone like so senior like Jeffrey in the group, we will tend to look to him for advice or look to him for directions
Yep,
or look
that's
to him
right.
for suggestions. But if but I knowing Jeffrey, he probably in the peer group, he probably say, hey, look, I may be senior, but in this case, I'm as equal as you are. So do not ask me for too many advice on it because we're all equals. I'm not your leader. I'm your peer. So let's
Right.
all establish that from the beginning. So it's very important,
Mhm.
going back to the ground rules, that all of us know our standing, all of
Mhm.
us know our expectations, so that we will not put too much undue pressure on one member or the other member.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. So it seems like setting ground rules is important
Yes,
as we do this peer supervision.
that's right.
Right. I also remember hearing something along that line where in this peer supervision group, it can include people from different professions.
Yes, that's right.
It may not be all from the career. They may not be all career practitioner.
That's right.
So
Yes.
I'm just curious because, example, if we have someone from HR, someone from the nursing,
Yep.
that does nursing, some maybe from logistics, and some maybe
Mm.
from like business management. They're
Yep.
so diverse in their profession.
Yep.
So because of that, I believe they will have their unique viewpoints, unique
Absolutely.
perspective, and that may
Absolutely.
result in disagreement. So
Mm.
is that a good or bad thing?
I would say that it's a very good question. I would say that firstly, having people from different industries brings about a richness in the
Mm-hmm,
discussion.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Having said that, say imagine that you mentioned earlier, Claire, that a person comes from HR, and then the
That's
rest
right.
of the group members are not HR practitioners. And
That's right.
As a HR practitioner, I'm sharing a case where I'm
Mm,
doing a career coaching situation with someone in the environment.
sure.
And this person who is, say, for example, a nurse, for example, will probably have no understanding of what I'm doing as HR person. But
That's
what
right.
is important here is in the process of the case that I'm sharing,
Mm-hmm.
I am presenting to the group, and I want the group to comment about certain things. Maybe I'm saying that today I'm sharing with us this case where I had a difficulty in trying to get my point through to this colleague.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm showing the video now, and I'm showing this the various questions I'm asking, and these are some of the responses that the colleague has towards me. So as all of you watch, I'd like you to observe what are some of the body reactions, or was it something I should have done better, or is there questions I should ask or something? So now everyone are watching the video, and all of them will have their own perspective, and they can then share their perspective. They can
Right.
even ask me, Tim, I noticed that in this on a 6 minute of the video, you said this, or someone
Mm-hmm.
else says, Tim, I noticed on a ninth minute you cross your arms. What's going on there? Something along those lines. So what will happen is that everyone will have their own perspective. Sometimes, of course, the if the another person, the peer supervisor from another industry doesn't understand where I'm coming from,
Mm-hmm.
then the onus is on the peer supervisor to ask questions to
Right.
so that he or she understands where I'm coming from as well.
I
So
see.
in a sense, it is richness, but again, it goes back to our ground rules again. That what is it that we expect of each other? What are some of the things that we should be asking, and what are some things that we can do to challenge one another?
Wow, this sounds exciting. So I guess in your master's class, would I have a chance to practice, facilitating and sharing?
Yes, in the master's our class, we will expect every one of us to bring to the 2 days our
Mm,
own case, and then in one of the sessions, what we'll do is I'll ask all of you individually to
mhm.
present a case. If you have video, play the video. If you don't have, present the case to us. And then as the case is being presented, those of us acting as a peer supervisors will listen and will begin to ask questions,
Right.
either questions around the theory, questions around skill set, question on
Okay.
ethical boundaries and dilemmas, and all those various things. You will be guided in the question asking process.
Right, that's awesome. So in
Yeah.
that sense, so in the sense that this peer supervision tend to be a little bit more non-directive compared to a clinical supervision. Is that true?
Yes, generally in peer supervision, because you're all equals. So what
Mm-hmm.
will happen is that maybe I'll talk about the clinical supervision. Clinical supervision traditionally has always been a senior practitioner guiding and helping a junior practitioner to become better in the practice. So what will
Right.
happen is that the senior practitioner will tend to give more directions, give more suggestions, give
Mm-hmm.
more so-called advice to the junior practitioner to improve the skill set. So
I
it's
see.
in a sense it's a little bit more directive because the junior practitioner or this case the supervisee is not going to turn around and say I disagree.
Mm,
Sometimes that may happen, but at the end of the day, it is still the relationship is still a little bit more one direction. Whereas
I
in a peer environment, it is more multi-direction. So it's a little bit more difficult to be directive. Maybe the directive part will probably come from inverted commas from the facilitator, where he or she is facilitating the moment and directing,
sure.
hey, we got 2 minutes more, finishing now, or something along those lines. But by and large, it is more self-directed and it
Mm-hmm.
is more bi-directional, if I will call it, or trip, or
Mm-hmm.
more not bi, it's a multiple direction. So
Mm-hmm.
it's less one direction but more multiple direction because we're all equals and peers.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just wondering, I mean, this is a separate question that just came to my mind.
Yep,
Uh, how should we organize this peer supervision? Because if let's say we are from an organization, some
yep.
organizations have the learning circles, have a
Hmm.
COP community practice. How about like private practitioners? I mean, how do we go about organizing one?
Okay. Of course, without letting the cat out of the bag, I'll just say very briefly that as a single practitioner, the
Mm,
first thing you need to do is to maybe join members, be a member of CDAS, for example, and
mm,
to reach out and to say that I'm interested to start a
mm,
peer supervision group who would like
mm.
to join. So that's
Oh,
one possible way. But of
mhm.
course, if you want to learn how to start a peer supervision group, then I encourage all of you to sign up for upcoming August masterclass of peer supervision, and you'll be taught how to start groups like this.
Okay, okay. I think that'd be lovely. I think if let's say I'm to attend a class, I think the class itself we can start one already.
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. All right, thanks for sharing, Tim. Really appreciate that. So I just
Okay.
want to share something that I picked up from the chat. Two person have commented. First one is it's good to raise the case conceptualization. It is a missing piece in the current practice salience today. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Another person commented that I think sharing evidence-based practice should be also be a part of a peer
Yeah.
supervision.
Yes, I agree. I agree. Yeah.
Excellent.
These are all part and parcel of the supervision process. So yes,
Right.
completely
So
agree.
these are the comment that came in, and actually after the webinar, some of them gave some feedback, and I just picked up two. I thought that was quite meaningful to share. So
Mm-hmm.
one of them who has attended mentioned that, in fact, he's exploring this because he has one staff who may be exploring the becoming a career practitioner, and to him, he felt that having this kind of peer supervision may make his colleague more comfortable and open up for more conversation
Mm-hmm. Yep.
rather
Yep.
than having this superior and subordinate this kind of relationship.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. In fact, and then another one commented that it's important to have the peer supervision for profession development and to help each other be accountable to ethical
Yeah.
dilemmas.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I thought to share that, wow, quite interesting that people are already thinking how they can put to practice what they have even learned from you through this short webinar.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah. So that's all for the Q&A portion. Okay, so as since I'm sharing slides, so may I just share about CDAS in case Tim has not shared. Right, well, so actually CDAS is established in February 2018. And we have our first launch in, I think, September, if I'm not wrong, 2018. So to us, it's important that, I mean, the group of us who started CDAS, to us, we felt very important that we want to promote the professional development and status of career development practitioner. And having this common platform will help really foster this professionalism. And of course, we also want to be a voice of all career practitioners in Singapore. And with this, we also hope to have this body of research knowledge to even bring this forward. Right, and also we want to become the representative association for career practitioners in Singapore and to be affiliated with international organizations in career development, which we are part of the APCDA. Okay, having said that, sorry, malfunction. Okay, so what happened is that if you're interested to become a CDAS member, there are actually 4 tiers. Most of us who are practitioner will be in the professional tier because well, we have some certification in career training, and we have some experience in the career development related field. And for those who are who may not have that academic achievement or that practice, not to worry, we are really open to anybody who's interested to join us as an associate. And even for students, just share with us your student card and you are in as a student member. Okay, so to find out more, please go to our website. Okay. So if you ask what are some of the benefits, I think one very important benefit is really having this networking opportunity to learn and to grow together. We also offer some book reviews, and we invite members and even experts to share their current practices and application with us, with all the members, really growing this profession together. And yeah, we may even use these nominal titles in your LinkedIn or in your other signature that you want to have. Okay, so just to share a little bit about additional benefits that we have as we partner with other partners. So John Wiley and Sons, we do have discount on books purchase. So just and go to catalog and just share with us titles. We also tied up with Imaginetics and Myers-Briggs Company and there are some discounts that are offered to our members. So do check out our website and write to us if you're interested. And last but not least, if you are interested to find out more about CDAS, do go to our website, LinkedIn, or Facebook. Okay, Tim, back to you.
Okay, so thanks, Claire. So just to wrap up this webinar, really the point for all of us at CDAS is we want to continue to grow as a profession, and we want to encourage all of us as members of the profession for all of you who are not members to really join us, partner with us, because of course there are lots of membership benefits that, of course, you know that in July, August, September, October, for the rest of this year, we are running several webinars as well as a masterclass. In July, we're running a webinar where we're going to invite a speaker from US to share with us about Schlossberg's 4S transition model. So that will be something interesting for us to listen to. And of course, in August, we have our masterclass, and in September, October, we have another few more webinars in store. So for those of you who are already members, you will know that when you sign up for those webinars and masterclass, you get a huge discount of the rates. But for those who are not members yet, then of course you pay a non-members rate, which is a lot more. So really, we encourage you, if you sign up as a member, then all those discounts you receive will more than cover your membership fee. So really, I encourage you to join and to fellowship with us so that you have the benefit of being part of this community that we are building. So I think that's the main thing I want to share with all of us. So thank you for spending your time and for watching this webinar. And I know that you will definitely benefit from by joining us for all the other webinars, because I know you want to grow in terms of your profession. So the surest way to grow is to continue learning. So to the next webinar and to our next meeting, I will see you, and take care and enjoy the rest of this week.
Okay, bye. Thanks, Tim.
Bye.